Hi, we're talking about all things communication. That means hormones, it means neurotransmitters, and it means everything in between. So I'm Tom Salt, a medical doctor and functional medicine practitioner.
I'm Elizabeth, a registered nurse and life coach.
And we're going to talk about the communication node of the functional medicine matrix today. So why do they call it communication?
Because it's communicating with each other.
Yeah, it's how, hi Yolanda, it's
Hi,
how
Yolanda.
cells communicate with each other and how they signal. So all of these things are called signaling molecules. And it's quite complex. And I think most people know the idea of the lock and key when it comes to immune globulins. You know, the immune globulins are, they say it's sort of like a lock and key. One specific immune globulin fits into a specific antigen to get it. Well, it's the same kind of thing with hormones. You've got hormones that run around your body. They either diffuse out of a cell and act locally, or they get into the blood and they go everywhere. But they, hi Selena.
Hi, Selena.
But they have to have a receptor. And it's the same with, that's hormones, but it's the same with neurotransmitters. So, you know, as an example, you've probably heard of serotonin. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter, and it's the target of a lot of antidepressants. But a serotonin molecule is released from a nerve cell, from one nerve cell, and it acts on the next nerve cell. And so there has to be the thing being released, the chemical, and then a receptor on the next cell. So out of this cell and onto this cell. And that's the way all communication works. And some of these communication molecules occur outside the cell, in the blood, in the cerebral spinal fluid, wherever. Some of them actually occur inside the cells, between the cell membrane and the nucleus of the cell, or the cell membrane and the mitochondria, the Golgi body, or whatever. So there's an array, this communications network that makes these cell towers look trivial. So there's a lot going on. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. Hi, Fran. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Jane. Thank you guys for showing up and commenting. Say hi. Mm-hmm. So, hormones. Well, let's start with sex hormones because they're everybody's favorite. So there's a ton of them, but people really talk mostly about three. There's estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. There's a ton more than that, but those are the big three. So the major hormones in women, estrogen and progesterone. The major hormones in men, testosterone. I've got this slide. I just showed you this slide the other day, the one that looks like a hi-fi set. And there's one big panel and then another big panel. And the bottom panel has about 50 dials and knobs and, you know, the things that go back and forth, the meters and all that stuff. And the top one just has one switch. It says on, off. And the top one is labeled male and the bottom one's named female. And it's a little bit true on all kinds of levels, but also on hormones. You know, women have a very significant monthly cycle with their hormones, where in the front half of the month they're estrogen dominant, the back half of the month they're progesterone dominant, and those things lead to different sorts of symptoms. And if things don't go just right, then you don't make a corpus luteum because you didn't ovulate. You have an anovulatory cycle, and when that happens, you don't have the right hormonal triggers, and things go badly. And then if you have a lot of stress in your life, you get insulin resistance. Insulin resistance can cause hormone abnormalities, estrogen dominance, which can lead to polycystic ovary and all kinds of things. Hi, Melissa. And Bridget. Hi. So there's a lot to talk about under hormones, and we'd love to entertain your questions about hormones. But guess what it all boils down to? You'll be surprised. What do you think it is?
Balance.
Balance? Yes, balance. What a surprise. It all boils down to balance of the 5 modifiable lifestyle factors. And our diet, which is one of the modifiable lifestyle factors. So, you hear people and they want to get the hormones tested. Well, that's fine, except you know what the real truth is? Most of the time, the vast majority of the time, hormone tests don't tell you anything useful. I'm sorry to tell you. And there are people who will say, well, your hormone test was this, we're going to make this little microscopic adjustment. So what? I'm sorry to say it, but almost never does it make a difference. What does make a difference is lifestyle. Makes a huge difference. In fact, in places like Okinawa, they don't even have a word for menopause. Women don't have menopausal symptoms. They don't get hot flashes or night sweats. And you know what they do? They sleep. They eat well. They have multi-generational families and relationships, a sense of purpose and place, and those kinds of things. So why would it be that diet is so important? Well, one of the reasons is I talked about locks and keys. If you think about the keys being hormones, if your locks are rusty or broken, you can have all the keys in the world and it doesn't help. So we got to lubricate the locks. How do we lubricate locks?
Oils, fats and oils.
Fats and oils.
Balanced fats and oils, a balance of
healthy fats and oils.
Of the healthy.
Instead of all, think about this, bacon fat. Now, bacon fat probably isn't bad for you, except that it's solid at room temperature, right? Whereas omega-3 fats are liquid at room temperatures. So which one of those two fats do you think is going to make your cell membranes more stiff? So if you don't have enough omega-3 fatty acids in your cell membranes, they become stiff. And these receptors, the locks, the receptors on your cells have to float around freely to do their job. So if you don't have enough omega-3 and omega-6 fats, you get stiff membranes. And that makes your cell membrane receptors not work well. And that gives you symptoms of hormone deficiency. So people are running around and they get their blood tests and it turns out it's in the normal range, but it's just maybe a little tiny bit on the low end of the normal range, maybe it's below half, and so, well, you probably could use a little more hormone. Well, it probably will make you feel somewhat better. But here's the thing, balance. This is not balance, right? This is balance. This isn't balance. This isn't balance. This isn't balance. This isn't balance. This is balance. And so you can feel better if things are out of whack. You can push this one up so it feels balanced, but that's not balance. So just taking more hormones at a time in your life, we're talking about perimenopausal things, at a time in your life when hormone-sensitive cancers are going up, is not a great idea.
Right. There's a reason why our hormone levels change as we age. It's to protect us from these things. So increasing them to help the symptoms is going to cause a host of all other issues. That's why it's so important to go back to the B word, balance, and have a balanced diet with balanced healthy fats. And
yeah, so there's a thing called an omega-3 index. It measures the amount of omega-3 fatty acids in your blood. Actually, you take the blood, you spin it down, so you get packed red blood cells, and you measure the amount of omega-3 fatty acids basically in the membranes of the red blood cells. And it should be around 10%. And most people, when I measure it, it's like less than 4. It's usually 4%, 3, 4, 5% maybe. Healthy people with really healthy diets, 4%, 5%. So, if you live on Okinawa and you eat ocean fish nearly every day, it's going to be 10, 12. And you will have a much more finely tuned receptor system, not just the sex hormone receptors, but all the molecules of emotion and so on receptors. So oil's really important. Phytonutrients, really important. You probably heard of phytoestrogens or plant estrogens. There's actually not really any such thing. But there are phytonutrients, chemicals in plants that have a weak affinity. They have a weak attraction to estrogen receptors. They're better called phytoestrogens, whereas SERM stands for selective estrogen receptor modulator. And so they're really kind of adaptogenic. So you take one of these plant SERMs or phytoestrogens, and if you're deficient in a hormone, it will stimulate that receptor just a little bit and give you the effect of a little more hormone. And if you have too much hormone, it will block that because it's only a weak stimulator. It'll block it from the more potent stimulator and effectively bring the effect of your hormones down. So they regulate your hormones very nicely. And these are found in flax and soy and red clover and all kinds of different things. There's a doctor out there right now who's trying to tell everybody that lignans are absolutely poisonous and you should never eat lignans, which of course are found in all plants. And it turns out that these lignans are the very things that are these phytoestrogens. And they're very balancing, and they happen to hitchhike along with healthy oils when you're eating those plants. So, that's just the beginning. Those are the hormones of, I guess sex hormones is the term I'm looking for. And so, what do those do for us? Well, obviously they're related to premenopausally, they're related to menstrual cycles and all that business. So if you have PMS or you have polycystic ovary or all those kinds of things, a big piece of that is your fats. The other piece is insulin resistance. So how do we treat those conditions nutritionally?
Insulin resistance?
Yeah, and polycystic ovary, which would be the same insulin resistance treatment.
So that would be with a low glycemic index diet, which would be the Renew diet.
Sure, a Renew diet. And
so a lot of whole foods, abundant servings of different diverse fruits and vegetables, the healthy fats, really no grains. Grains can definitely be a trigger. Vegetables that are low in glycemic index, fruits with low natural sugars in them.
So almost any vegetable is going to be fine. The fruits, probably berries, I guess.
Berries, mostly berries.
Melons.
Small amount of melons and
avoid tropical fruits
like pineapple, bananas,
which
those have a higher
high in sugar. So rather, if you're having PMS or you're having perimenopausal symptoms, rather than thinking, oh, I got to go to that guy and get some, or that woman and get some hormones, do these lifestyle things first. Make sure you're sleeping, manage your stress, get a little activity in your life, and do an oil change. Do an oil change and do a sugar change. So the sugar change means get off of the simple carbs, get on to more complex carbs, eat more whole foods, not fractured foods, not highly ultra-processed foods.
Right. And stress is a huge factor. I mean, when we're stressed, we release hormones. And, when you have larger amounts of those hormones, it's all about the balance. So you're having too much, which creates less of the other hormones. And stress is huge. Again.
Yep. Anybody feeling stressed recently for some unknown reason? So those are the sex hormones. Then
Michelle, I need an oil change.
Yeah. You want 30 weight or 20/50? So, then there's a whole host of other hormones. There's pituitary hormones. The pituitary gland is kind of the leader of the pack. It sort of runs the show. The brain sits on top of the thalamus, which sits on top of the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus communicates directly with the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland kind of sends out all of the master hormones like adrenal stimulating hormone and thyroid stimulating hormone and all that stuff. So, obviously those hormones working properly and being lubricated well with the right oils and so on is really important. And then obviously those from the pituitary, we talk about the pituitary, adrenal above your kidneys, pituitary, adrenal, thyroid, gonadal axis, right? So it's just all of them. But the adrenal, pituitary adrenal axis is really important for the management of stress. And for many people who have got issues with oil change, needing an oil change, it's going to be really hard for the pituitary to send out the proper signals. My dog is snoring over here. Big. Well, we're not keeping up, are we?
We're putting him to sleep.
That's what it is.
Going a little deep, no.
So, if you don't have the oils, then the pituitary can't manage the hyperadrenal activity effectively. So, it's hard to shut off the stress. So I think Yolanda has
I have hypothyroidism, which affects my hormones a lot. Any suggestions on how to balance that as well?
Yeah, so it's really the same answer. It's the whole foods. I'm not saying you do this, it's just an example, but you eat a big bolus of sugar, right? So, and that could be rice, it could be white flour, it could be cookies, cakes, ice cream, whatever it is. But you eat a big bolus of sugar, your blood sugar goes up, that forces your insulin to go up, which forces your blood sugar to go down, which makes you want to eat some more sugar, which then you're doing this all day, right? Now, it turns out that those excursions of blood sugar and cortisol affect everything else. It affects the way your adrenal gland reacts with cortisol. It affects the way your pituitary gland interacts with your thyroid and blah, blah, blah. So managing that piece of the diet and then doing the oil change piece and getting a lot more of the healthy oils in your system will help. Oil lubricates the system so it works better. So I think that's really... Oh, you need synthetic oil. Yeah, you got a serious problem. You need synthetic oil. Yeah, you better get an AMSOIL dealership or something.
Does a hysterectomy have an effect on this?
Yeah, it absolutely does. There are studies suggest that within, I can't remember the exact number, it was like between 2 and 5 years, your ovaries don't survive. So once you've had a hysterectomy, even at a young age, often your ovaries don't survive. And your adrenal glands have to take over the burden of what the ovaries are supposed to be doing. And so this becomes that much more important, because if your adrenal glands are busy being squeezed because of your stress levels, they're not going to compensate well for your ovaries. So yeah, they have a major impact on almost every woman who's had a hysterectomy will start having some kind of perimenopause, might be very mild, but some kind of menopausal symptoms within a couple of years or even sooner of having a hysterectomy. So it absolutely has an effect. But the dealing with the oils and the glycemic index of your diet will have a big impact on that.
Christy says, okay, I have gained approximately 40 pounds in the last 2 months. I had my thyroid tested and it is TSH 1.32 and T4 1.3. I am 40 years old. I also have a goiter. The doctors believe I may be perimenopausal because all the fat has gone straight to my stomach. We eat very healthy. My husband is losing weight and I'm gaining.
Doesn't that make you mad?
He's a diabetic.
Yeah. He's a diabetic, he's losing weight, and you aren't, and you can't lose weight. Yeah, that's very frustrating, isn't it? So here's the deal. There's something, T3 to reverse T3 ratio. So the hormones that you usually get checked are your TSH and your T4, which you got. And, for most of the time, you only get a TSH, and they don't even do the T4. But in your case, because things seem backwards, somebody said, well, we're going to be thorough, we're going to do the T4 also. But there's also a free T3 and a reverse T3. And some people do not efficiently convert. So the active hormone is T3. And T4 is converted to T3. Now that conversion requires T3, so that makes it hard to begin with if you don't convert it well. But it also requires selenium and iodine and B vitamins. And then there's a genetic issue. So some people just never convert well. So they're always T3 deficient. But here's the deal. You might actually get your T4 and T3 measured and they might be in, quote, in the normal range. What you really need to know is what's the reverse T3. Because reverse T3 blocks the effects of T3. So you get a TSH, a T4, a free T4, which you had because I know from the number, but you get a TSH or a free T4, a free T3, and a reverse T3. And then if you look it up, if you Google it, T3, reverse T3 ratio, there's sites where you can plug in those numbers and figure out if you've got that, if you have too much reverse T3 compared to your T3. And if you do, then you will benefit from, instead of Synthroid or just regular Synthroid and all of the normal synthetic hormones for thyroid, or T4, you'll benefit from a natural thyroid replacement like an Armor, which has some T3 and T4. So that's something to perhaps look into in that instance. But you're not alone. There's a lot of people in that boat. And of course, when you go in and you are in this situation, they say something like, just clean up your diet or exercise more or whatever. And it's like, yeah, sorry, that's not going to fix it. It's unfortunately a communication problem, and you probably have an issue with that conversion of T4 to T3. And the other thing that inhibits that, insulin and cortisol. So stress will make it worse. Insulin resistance will make it worse, which is really frustrating because as you gain weight, you become more insulin resistant. So it's almost like, it's a dog chasing its tail, and it's really hard to make it go away.
So Christy said yes, and then had those tested 8 of 2019. T3 was 3.8, T4 was 1.0.
Yeah, so we just need the reverse T3.
Jane says, I do not have any symptoms after my hysterectomy of any kind, but in my late 30s, I got hives. You took me off all my hormones at 40 years of age. No more rusty locks. I got a new key.
There you go. Good to hear it. Skeleton key, I hope. Yeah, so you can see that there's a lot going on with hormones in terms of they all interact. We just talked about, how thyroid and insulin and blood sugar and cortisol all interact. So, it can be a complicated web that you have to really tease apart, however you say it. So that I think is an important thing to be thinking about. What do we have here?
Bridget, I had high reverse T3 and I gained a lot of weight after I went into remission. Several months later, I no longer had hypothyroidism and no meds. I didn't know that could happen. Yeah,
so I would say that's the minority of people that happens to. Congratulations, that's great. Most people, though, don't have to be on the T3 for life. Just a few months is often all it takes to kind of, once you get back on, you get on some selenium, you get on the B vitamins, you get on iodine, make sure you're sufficient in those. You don't have to have super duper doses, just, healthy doses. And then a few months of the T3 from either Armor Thyroid or one of those kinds of things, or you can get something called Cytomel, which is T3. And only a few months of that, and usually things straighten themselves out, and you can for sure get off the T3, and then some people can get off the meds altogether, so that's good for you. So then there's the molecules of emotion. Molecules of emotion. So we alluded to this. We talked about serotonin, but there's also dopamine, and there's, my mind just went blank. What's the third eye hormone? Melatonin. Did I say melatonin?
I thought you said melatonin.
Oh, okay. Melatonin. Dopamine, melatonin,
Maybe you didn't.
norepinephrine, GABA, glutamate. There's lots of them. Some are excitatory, some are inhibitory. And so as an example, the glutamate, GABA are kind of push-pull. The GABA is kind of mellows things out. Yeah, hypo, we figured it out. Yeah, lucky. Well, you deserve it though, right? Everybody deserves a little luck once in a while. Anyway, the GABA tends to be inhibitory or kind of mellowing, and the glutamate is excitatory. In fact, so excitatory that too much of it can actually cause, in experiments, can cause seizures. So, as an example, the amino acid taurine is a precursor for GABA. So, you can actually use taurine to increase your GABA. But you can also just eat healthy proteins. Taurine is a pretty common amino acid, so having a protein-sufficient diet is the first step. And then after that, you can certainly consider adding things like taurine. And again, the enzymes that make GABA need all the usual suspects. They need the normal minerals and the normal vitamins and so on to work properly. So that's where that healthy diet comes in, and avoiding sugars and all that stuff. But when, the interesting thing is that we talked about this the other night. We talk about muscle memory. Well, there's memory too. There's nerve memory, and if your limbic system, which is the system in your body that sort of manages your emotional state and your fight or flight versus rest and digest state, it can get into memory loops. So that people with multiple chemical sensitivity, they have some kind of an injury, then the injury is now gone, but every time they smell something pungent, their limbic system goes off as if they're being poisoned. And they can't function, they can't get out of bed, they can't do anything. And retraining that limbic response is really important. And many of these people, when you do, guess what, an omega-3 index on them, it's like 2 or 3. It's really, really low. And if you get that omega-3 index up to 10, and if you then do exercises to retrain the limbic system, they're much more likely to have more moderated responses. This sort of dog chasing its tail response, that's not the way it's supposed to work, the way all reactions in the body are supposed to work, is you're supposed to have a big, robust initial response, whether it's to an infection or to a trauma or to an emotional situation, a big, robust response that self-normalizes. And when it can't self-normalize, that's when you get into the multiple chemical sensitivity with the limbic overreaction, or you get into PMS, or you get into depression or anxiety or bipolar or whatever. And part of having the flexibility to self-extinguish these reactions is having flexibility in the biochemical signaling pathways. And that means healthy locks, healthy keys, and in general, healthy machinery. So, and it's a two-way street. I was getting to this, I talked briefly about it. We talked about the Botox experiment last night. Do you remember that?
Nope.
Botox in the frown muscles.
smiling.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite experiments of all time. So they give Botox to people so that they can't frown. So they're kind of in this sort of, because if you paralyze this muscle, these muscles are unopposed, so it actually lifts the sides of your mouth, and you walk around smiling.
Like the Joker.
Maybe not quite that much. But what happens then is not only is it a two-way signal in your own body, but also people respond to you differently. So when a teenager, if you've had teenagers and they're always sullen and grumpy and have their head down, and my youngest son was had hair and it was always hanging down in his face and it made his mother crazy. And one day his report card came back not so great, so she went to school, picked him up, took him to the barber, had it cut off. But you know what? He was a completely different kid when his hair wasn't hanging in his head, face, and he was looking down all the time. The way we carry ourselves makes a difference to our the way we feel, and the way other people respond to us makes a difference in how we feel. And it's a two-way street. Now, that is not to say that there isn't serious depression and serious anxiety, but I'm talking about the walking wounded, the people who are walking around just feeling crappy, not the people who are, desperately depressed and suicidal. I'm not trying to minimize that at all. What else do we have?
Hi, Kelsey and Sean. Bridget, exercise such as for the limbic system.
Oh, yeah. So really it's sort of meditative activities. And again, meditation is a really big word that means a lot of things. Maybe we should call them centering practices. Centering practices can be anything from stillness of various sorts, whether it's a sitting meditation or a walking meditation, or a listening meditation, or a sensory meditation. So sensory meditation would be like just sitting in nature and being present with your sensory experience. And when thoughts come to you, try to let go of those thoughts and instead focus on the sensory experience, whether it's the bird songs or the breeze on your face or the sights that you're seeing or whatever it is.
Right.
It can also be movement. So it could be, dance or, like Sufis and the dervishes spinning for hours on end. I don't know how they do that. It could be art. Anything that loses you.
Anything that slows down that chatter in your brain. So it's really any activity can be a meditative experience.
The things that get you in flow. So flow is that state where you look up and suddenly realize it's been 2 hours and you didn't notice. That's flow. Not the woman who sells insurance.
So watching television is flow?
No, watching television is not flow. Watching television is something different from flow.
Okay.
It's called distraction.
Well, sometimes if you sit down on the couch, or like you, when you surf on your phone, is that flow?
No, that's distraction.
Okay, yeah.
That's totally distraction.
So it's not anything where you look up and 2 hours later, poof, the time's gone.
Good, thank you for clarifying. That's very true. I can't read. What does Stephanie say?
Stephanie, sorry, this is off topic, but I have something driving me crazy. For the last week, I have been having this smell of cigarette smoke that I can feel I keep smelling. Sorry, all the other comments are popping up. We don't smoke. Could I be lacking something? It's just odd. It's driving me nuts.
Well, maybe. But do you have any sinus issues? Do you have like a chronic sinus congestion or chronic recurrent sinus problems? Some people with chronic recurrent sinus issues actually get a fungal growth in their sinuses, and that can smell very smoky. So I would think about that. If you have chronic sinus issues, you might want to see somebody who's familiar with that and it's actually an antifungal nasal spray, which works very well for that. And usually only have to take it for a while. I'm not thinking, I can't think of any other obvious reasons. I'm sure there's 1,000,002 reasons why somebody could smell it. Nobody else in the house smells it, I take it. Fungus, so if you have a wet basement, that same smell can come from fungal growth in a wet area. It doesn't have to be the basement. It could be, in a wall in a bathroom or whatever. So you might think about that as well.
Jane, wow, my grandson started muscle memory exercises today. He has autism and just found out he is dyslexic this week too. His exercise is close to yoga.
His what?
His exercise is close to it,
Yeah.
the yoga,
Yeah.
which yoga is great.
Yep. Yoga is another good activity. You get all twisted up into some weird thing and you have to concentrate very carefully to not fall down. So that's like a mantra. It's a balance mantra in a way.
Yeah.
And let's see, did we miss Kate? Hi, how are you doing? And Robert, hi. And okay, could possibly be sinus surgery twice. Yeah, yeah. Might be worth looking into. So, but what else could you do if that were the case? Well, all of the things that we talk about. Plus, I don't know if you've ever seen the sinus rinse bottles. It's a squeeze bottle. It's got a straw that goes to the bottom. I actually often have people put like 2 tablespoons of colloidal silver in that 8-ounce bottle and then rinse their sinuses with it a couple of times a day. That colloidal silver will help often if it's a chronic sinus issue. So that's something, just a natural thing you could try. And so we talked about sex hormones, we talked about pituitary adrenal axis, we talked about molecules of emotion, we talked about the two-way communication between sort of your attitude or your facial expression and your habitus and your emotional state. I'm going to ask the famous question.
What do I have to add to it all?
Yeah.
Well, as I was thinking of things, you pretty much cover everything. If I just wait long enough, I don't have to say a thing. Works out pretty well because he spews it all out. But mainly the only thing is that I thought of more extensively was, of course, like the psychosocial, emotional piece of it all. So, we talk about different things that set off our limbic system and the memory, and there's also emotional traumas that happen and triggers, and our body can actually become almost addicted to these responses that we have. So getting yourself out of that pattern can be very difficult and trying.
We kind of think we deserve it. We think we deserve because we're just a lousy sack of steaming dung or whatever it is.
Well, in our bodies, it's like any other chemical. Our bodies actually get addicted to those chemicals. So it creates ways for you to react because it wants that chemical response, even though it feels horrible. But, our bodies just get addicted to that response.
Yeah, so a couple of books that help with sort of identifying and thinking about these sorts of triggers. I love The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. It's got some, Native American mysticism in it, and some people find that difficult because it's maybe not exactly in the mainstream Christian ideal, but that's not the most important part of the book. The most important part of the book are the 4 agreements. And I think that those are really universal in almost any language or religion.
Yeah,
and,
they are.
And so they just help you kind of create a new vocabulary for thinking about your relationships. I like to think of it as, it's like there's a bicycle wheel with a hub, and that's you, and a rim, and that's another person. And all the spokes are different relationships you have. So maybe me, I have a mother, and I have a relationship, I'm the son, but maybe there's other relationships that are unhealthy. Maybe in a family dynamic, I'm a scapegoat, or maybe in a family dynamic, I'm the black sheep, or maybe, there's all these different things, right? And there's really only 4 spokes that are healthy, and those are the 4 agreements. All the other agreements, they're not good agreements. So it's just a way of thinking through relationships. Another great book on relationships that I think we like a lot is Braving the Wilderness by Brené Brown. And that book is it talks about a concept I love, which I'll let you say it because I always screw it up. conversations.
Yes, we have many conversations in a day, and a few of them involve other people.
And a few of them involve other people. So we have a lot of internal dialogue, right? And one of the other things she says in the book that I like about conversations with other people is she will say, right now I'm thinking. So when she's having a conversation and she's hearing something that she's is pushing a button, she'll say, well, right now I'm thinking that what you just said means that you're angry or you don't care or you don't love me or whatever. But she makes sure to say, I'm thinking. Because then it's not about you're an asshole. It's about I'm thinking that you don't like me. And then that gives a person a moment to pause and decide if, yep, that's exactly what I meant. Or, no, I'm sorry, that's not really what I meant. This is more what I meant. So those are great books. Think about looking at those. There's another.
So Bridget. I did have Botox in the spot you were talking about. It was amazing, and I believe since I wasn't turning my mouth down, my chronic pain seemed better.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? It's amazing to me. I think it's really powerful.
And Selena, I have the 4 agreements posted on my fridge.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. It's, all self-help books, every single one of them, you read it and you turn the page and you go, oh man, this is great. Oh, I can't believe it. They must have been watching me. Oh, look at this. This is amazing. And then you put it down, never to think about it again. That's not how it works.
Right.
You got to. It doesn't matter if it's I'm okay, you're okay, or if it's braving the wilderness, or if it name another 752,408 self-help
I've probably
books.
read them all.
Yeah, me too. But you just pick one and make it be your guide. One that speaks to you. Not anyone, because maybe one of them doesn't speak to you, but one that speaks to you. Really dive into it. Really make it your guide.
Right, and listen to it, because obviously reading it feels great. It feels like, oh yes, I'm identifying with this, and I'm not alone. And then you put it down just to go back to, you when you're reading it, you think, oh, all these changes I can make, and you put it down and then nothing happens. So you have to do the work. Yep. You have to be continually aware of your body's response. So your thoughts, your emotions, how you respond to the environment around you. It's all about awareness and action. Reading's great. Reading them is great, but awareness and action. So having it out where you can see it is huge. Because your fridge, you go to that how many times in a day?
If you haven't journaled at least twice the volume of the book, you probably haven't done the work.
And the work's hard.
The work's hard.
Reading the book is easy. It's when you actually have to dig in and listen to yourself and reflect on it and journal on it and then try to make changes when you're in the middle of these feelings. That's the hard stuff. It's easier to read the book.
Yep. Which requires embracing those parts of yourself that you're not really entirely proud of.
Yeah.
That's how change happens, is by embracing and nurturing and loving the aspects of yourself that you're not proud of. Like if your child is whiny and crying, what do? You hug them, you hold them. What do we do to ourselves? If you did that to your kid, he'd probably keep whining, right?
No.
Yeah. All right, well, we're at close to 45 minutes now, so we are going to let you guys go.
Hi, Fran.
Yep, hi, Fran.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks to all of you for watching, and we will be here tomorrow. That's Good Friday.
Yep, it's Friday.
So we're going to talk about something good, structural integrity. So structural integrity, well, you know what? Let's talk about emotions instead.
Yeah, that sounds better. I think it's Good Friday. It should be something more of a...
So we're going to talk, we'll talk about mental, emotional, and spiritual health tomorrow evening. And we've got some ideas about that. then we'll have to figure out what to talk about next week, but I think it'll be more functional medicine. All righty. Tomorrow night, 8:30, same bat time, same bat channel. Bye.
Bye.